Hello and welcome to New Awakening Theology. In this video, we will be discussing Christ's commandment to forgive offenders. The preacher's Sunday sermon was Forgive Your Enemies. Toward the end of the service, he asked his congregation, How many of you have forgiven your enemies? About half held up their hands. He then repeated his question as it was past lunchtime, and this time about 80% held up their hands. He then repeated his question again. All responded except one small elderly lady. Miss Jones, inquired the preacher, are you not willing to forgive your enemies? I don't have any, she replied, smiling sweetly. Miss Jones, that is very unusual. How old are you? 93, she replied. Oh, Miss Jones, what a blessing and a lesson to us all. Would you please come down in front of this congregation and tell us all how a person can live 93 years and not have an enemy in the world? The little sweetheart of a lady tottered down the aisle, faced the congregation, and said, I outlived the old hags. Okay, be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons so you won't miss any of my videos. In Matthew 18:21 through 22, we read, Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to seven? Up to 7 times? Jesus answered, I tell you, not even 7 times, but 77 times. When Peter asked this question, he thought he was being generous. The traditional rabbinical teaching was that an offended person needed to forgive a brother only 3 times. Jesus replied that forgiveness needs to be exercised to a much greater extent, not just 7 times, but 70 times 7 times. This would come to 490 times, but this is not what Jesus meant. Jesus meant that there should be no limits set on forgiveness. We forgive because God has forgiven us, and no offense against us can remotely compare with the incalculable amount of times God is willing to forgive us. N.T. Wright, in his book, Evil and the Justice of God, wrote, Forgiveness does not mean I didn't really mind or it didn't really matter. I did mind and it did matter. Otherwise, there wouldn't be anything to forgive. Merely something to adjust my attitudes about. We hear a lot today about people needing to adjust their attitudes to things they formerly thought were wrong. But that's not forgiveness. If I have a wrong attitude towards someone, and if I need to adjust my attitude, if anything, it's me who needs forgiveness for my misguided earlier stance. Nor is it forgiveness the same as saying, let's pretend it didn't really happen. This is a little trickier because part of the point of forgiveness is that I'm committing myself to work toward the point where I can behave as if it hadn't happened. But it did happen. And forgiveness isn't pretending that it didn't. Forgiveness is looking hard at the fact that it did and making a conscious choice, a decision of the moral will to set aside so that it doesn't come as a barrier between us. Because we are human beings, forgiveness is a difficult thing sometimes. because we continually remember the wrongs that have happened to us. As a result, we're in a continuous struggle with ourselves over the issue of forgiveness. We often have trouble forgiving ourselves for the things that we've done, and that carries over into making it difficult to forgive others. We must first understand that if we truly repent and ask God for forgiveness, God will forgive us in a way that we cannot imagine. In A Forgiving God and an Unforgiving World, Ron Lee Davis shares a powerful story of forgiveness about a priest from the Philippines. The clergyman had carried the weight of one particular sin that plagued his conscience for years. Though he had repented multiple times, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was still to be punished by God. At one point in his ministry, there was a deeply religious woman in his parish that loved God and claimed to have visions in which she spoke face to face with Jesus. The priest was initially skeptical, so he decided to test her by saying, "The next time you speak with Christ, I want you to ask him what sin your priest committed while he was in seminary." The woman agreed. A few days later, the priest asked, "Well, did Christ visit you in your dreams?" "Yes, he did," she replied. "And did you ask him what sin I committed in seminary?" "Yes." "Well, what did he say?" "He said, I don't remember." You see, what God forgives, he forgets. Now, in my next video, we'll discuss Christ's commandment: honor marriage. Thanks, and have a great day.